Good morning.
Good morning, Justin. Monday Matters, and here we are on Monday evening, and you are here in place of JD, Pastor JD, who is out today.
Yeah, so this will be interesting.
Yeah.
So a lot of pressure.
Almost always, Justin is behind the camera, but not today.
Yeah. So we'll see how long this lasts.
Good to have you here.
Yeah.
Hey, so rather than our typical discussion, came across an article I wanted to have us reflect on for a few minutes today. And are you familiar with the Babylon Bee?
I am.
All right.
I do follow the Babylon Bee.
What is the Babylon Bee?
It is a satire site. They do post periodically. It is conservative leaning, but political and church hits different topics like that. If you're familiar with The Onion, it's very similar, just a little different spin on it.
Yeah, and there's a lot. The thing I've seen in it, I guess I don't really follow it, but something came in my. I don't remember where it popped up, but it popped up somewhere in social media, and it talked about the 10 biblically defensible 10 biblically defensible reasons for leaving a church.
That's interesting. So
I thought maybe we could look at these and see what you thought, see what I thought, and go from there.
All right, sounds good. Let's take a look at them.
Yeah. So number one, well, let me just start off with the article. It says, if you've ever wondered if you should leave a church, wonder no more. The Babylon Bee is here to help. Here are 10 solid, biblically defensible excuses for leaving a church that is not serving you enough.
All right.
So number one, they buy their coffee beans from Costco.
I mean, that seems pretty legit.
I know.
I'm not a big coffee connoisseur, so maybe I could probably get past on that one. But I mean, who wants coffee from Costco? That doesn't seem very
boutique enough.
Yeah, like we're here to serve. So
yeah. What do you think about that? I mean, we have pretty good coffee, don't we?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think we have a wonderful staff over there that makes some really nice lattes. So thank you to the volunteers if any of you are watching.
I mean, there was a time when church coffee was like the worst coffee ever.
It's like the tar-like substance, right? It was like real black as black.
In fact, there's one of our Sunday school classes used to have a percolator. Remember what a percolator is? Have you ever seen a percolator?
I think so.
Yeah,
from my childhood.
A couple years ago, even before COVID, they were still using it. But and they just liked the coffee from the percolator. But that wasn't what we serve out front. So
percolator sounds like a dance.
Percolator, yeah, right. All right, number two, their Wi-Fi isn't strong enough to check your fantasy football lineup during service. Priorities, people.
I'm not sure I should talk about this one.
Okay. Let's talk about that. So football does happen during Sunday morning church, right? And we're on the West Coast.
Yeah, it's a very, very real situation. Being somebody that came from the East Coast, and I do love football, and my football team happens to play in the early NFL slot. When I lived in Ohio, 1 o'clock was doable. 10 a.m., which is also the start time for church, is football time. So I think we should move church service. I heard they do that in Texas.
I mean, it's possible. You have a fantasy football team?
Yeah, a couple.
Yeah. Oh, you have a couple?
Yeah,
so you
tell
play in
my
a couple
wife.
leagues. Oh, don't tell your wife. It's just between us, right?
Yeah, no one's wink, wink.
Yeah. So good. Have you ever checked your fantasy football team during church? Ever?
For fear of lightning, yes, I have checked it.
Wow.
I have.
Did you check it this Sunday during
I did
church?
not. I have not checked it since I've been coming here.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I'm since I'm the online kind of guy that's messing with, I don't want to eat up bandwidth.
Oh, hey, you know what? Yeah, that's a good point. So Justin does our online. He posts the services and more than that. I mean, tell us what you do.
I try and do all the graphics, all the I get the services set up, make sure they're streaming, get them to YouTube, get the lyrics up on the screens, kind of just all the tech stuff that happens on Sunday. I kind of have my fingers in all of it.
Yeah. So has anything ever happened in terms of the tech stuff that's really thrown you off?
Everything. The nice thing with tech stuff is there's always random gnomes or elves that get involved, and you'll all of a sudden lose internet service in the middle of service, or programs will randomly crash. So
Right.
I try to minimize as much as we can. So
Yeah. And we're glad to have you. We really started. I mean, we would record our services before COVID and all that stuff, but at this point, we're pretty much online as well as in live at the same time. So,
that's one of the COVID helped push.
yeah, right.
You know.
Right. And it did for everybody.
Yep.
If you wanted to survive, you had to go online.
Yep.
So yeah. All right.
So stay off those fantasy things during service, because you're messing with my bandwidth.
So, all right. So how much bandwidth do we have?
Plenty.
All right.
Plenty. It's really not that big of a deal.
Well, stay
somebody
off because
checking
you're so gripped
somebody
by the
checking
sermon.
the Steelers score is not gonna
Yeah, right.
ruin it
The
for me.
Steelers score. Let's not talk about the Steelers this Sunday or from yesterday. It was rough. So anyway, let's move on. Number 3 was the guy doing announcements asks you to stand up and introduce yourself.
That's real.
Yeah.
That's it can be a very intimidating thing. I don't think it's a reason you should leave a church.
Well, yeah, but it's a reason not to come back, right?
Yeah.
So, have you ever been to a service? I mean, I know this is satire, right? But have you ever been to a service where, would any guest please stand up and introduce yourself? Have you ever been to a church like that?
I think when I was real little,
Yeah.
it was a little more common to have guests stand up. And it was always kind of weird. For the most part, at least where I was at, it was, hey, stand up and basically put a bullseye on your back. But we're not asking you to talk.
Right.
So that was
Oh, wow.
probably growing up. I don't notice that anymore.
Yeah, I've been to several churches in my lifetime where that was the practice. If you were visiting, please stand up and introduce yourself. Where are you from? Are you that? Oh my goodness! You talk about wanting to just crawl out.
Yeah. It's tough. It puts you on a spot, and you don't. You're just not ready to open up yet.
So the funny thing is, when you visit, it's incredibly hard to visit a church anyway, because you're going to a room full of people that you kind of sense they all know each other, and they don't, but you kind of think they do. So they all know each other, and it's a different, culture. They have their own way of doing stuff. So you're just trying to slide in and see and observe, but you get there, and then you want to be invisible. Now there's two things you want. You want to be noticed. You want to be noticed because you're a visitor. You want them to see you and to welcome you and to feel like, hey, they were ready for me as a visitor. But you don't want to be noticed at the same time.
I have
pointed out.
I have numerous people have told me that's like they walk into a new church and they want everybody to greet them and come in and notice them and be friendly, but at the same point in time not talk to them because they don't.
Yeah.
And it's weird. It's like, how do you do that? How do you observe and want to be felt welcome? Like, it's a really thin line on what is okay.
Right. It is. It's really awkward, and I get it. It's hard for people to visit a church. But it's a lot easier if you can slide in, sit on the back row. Of course, all our church members are on the back row, right? Yeah. Sit on the back row and be invisible, but at the same time, somebody welcomed you and somebody noticed you, but they didn't point you out.
Yeah.
So
and the nice I have on, if you're looking on how to notice new people at your church, just a smile, a wave, and a good morning can sometimes be enough. Like that line of, hey, you acknowledged me, you noticed I was here, but don't.
Now it's really different too between Blue Mountain and Skyrocket, because Skyrocket is a much smaller venue, and so it's pretty hard to slip in unnoticed at Skyrocket.
Yeah.
So I'll tell a quick story, if you don't mind.
I like stories.
Yeah. So I was back to Ohio, where we're both from, right? Yeah. I was back to Ohio, I don't know, a month or two ago, and I was at my parents' church, and my parents were there early, because that's what parents do, right? They go early, and I was there at the church with them as a guest, And I'm standing at a table looking at some stuff, and this lady walks by, and I said, "Good morning." And she says, "Good morning." And then she stopped and turned, and she said, "Who are you?"
That's
Who are
probably
you?
not the introduction or the greeting
right?
you want.
Like, who, what is happening? There's a stranger here. Who are you? And then you know what I said to her? I said, "You can't greet a guest like that. You can't do that. That's like the worst thing you can possibly, you can't do it. You have to say, 'Good morning.' And maybe introduce yourself, or have we met, or anything. But yeah, who are you?
Who are you? That's probably one we should knock from our vernacular.
Yeah, so if somebody's visiting the church, don't say, 'Who are you?' That's probably going to really throw them off. Yeah. Number 4, bulletins always have spelling mistakes. I mean, that is a good reason to leave a church, right?
It's funny. I read that one and I was like, oh, that one's taken from, that's like lawyer stuff or businesses or, other places that you go that have people that are paid to pay to the details. If they're not doing the small details,
yeah, right. Yeah,
are they not taking care of it? So bolt.
If they get the little things wrong, who knows what else they're getting wrong?
Yeah.
So yeah, right. If they didn't spell that right.
Yeah, it seems to be a stretch, but it's as fast as we leave stuff, I can see it.
But it is true that, I mean, okay, so if I see something that's spelled wrong, it drives me nuts. Because it does, to me, feel like, wow, if this church cared, they would probably prove this stuff.
That is why you guys don't allow me to type anything. My spelling is atrocious. So I personally give a person a pass on that. But it is funny, little small details can consume you at that point in time and make you curious about what's really going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Reason to leave a church? Probably not.
I would hope not.
All right, what's the next one?
So number 5, the sermon calls you to repent of your sins, be forgiven, and live forever with Christ. This seems so invasive for a first impression, not to mention all the pressure for membership and accountability. What is this, a cult? That was kind of their, they got little responses after the statements that they make.
Yeah, what do you do with that one?
I don't know. If it's your first time inside the church, it can be kind of a, you're asking me to do a whole lot. I mean, I guess it goes back to I want to be a fly on the wall and be greeted and welcome, but you're putting rubber of the road right away on that one.
Yeah, right. But you never know when someone's going to visit, right?
Yeah.
So that's a funny thing. I'll do a message, a salvation message in a sermon sometimes. And then other times we'll talk about other things in Scripture. And so sometimes the sermon might be more for people who are already Christ followers. And sometimes it might be a call to examine your life and look at, where you are and how can you know God and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
I'm very, how you guys put together a sermon. I don't write sermons, so that process is not one familiar to me. But yeah, you have, in theory, a new visitor, a new time believer, potentially every Sunday.
Yeah.
And you have people that have been here 40 years.
Right.
And all these different walks in between, because there are certain subjects that you're like, well, that's going to scare a new person, or there's certain subjects that you're like, I'm going to bore someone that's been in here for a long time. How do you, when you're putting those together, and I know this may be a long subject, how do you balance between, I don't want to scare off this person, but I need to make sure that this person's hearing the right message? Okay. Or do you just, hey, today we are going to have a tough message. If you are new here.
Yeah. Actually, that's part of the secret sauce. So if you have to say something to the church, like, it's to, longtime members or something like that to move them forward, oftentimes the best approach is to tell them, okay, if you're not a Christ follower, this message really isn't for you. You're welcome to listen. We're glad you're here, but I'm going to be talking specifically to our people about this. So, what that does is it releases a lot of pressure, and a lot of times a visitor will then lean into the conversation and say, okay, you're inviting me in on how this stuff really works, and they actually hear the message more than they would if they were just like, if you just kind of slapped it down on them.
Putting those expectations out, that probably makes at least they understand what's coming. So, cool.
So the other thought I have with that is today, years ago, people would hear the message and they would, they'd come to the altar and they'd get saved right then and there on the spot. And so they would believe and then they would start to belong to a church. Well, today, it works kind of opposite. Today, for the most part, people belong and then they begin to believe. And so I don't know when that changed, but it's like they connect with the church. They connect with people at the church. They connect with, they want to have their kids in the kids ministry. They want to be a part of MOPS. They want to be a part of what's happening. And so they belong. And then at some point, it sinks in and they start to believe the things that they're hearing on a regular basis. And so, they belong before they believe.
And I wonder if social media and the internet and things like that is because you can start kind of searching for stuff. I think if you go back to the 30s or 40s, you kind of had to be involved in the group, I guess, to find out about church. That information wasn't around But now anyone that's curious can safely, and sometimes incorrectly or correctly, depending on where they're going on the internet, get some of that information. So then people are desperate to belong. So we have groups like MOPS, or I know one when I was younger, it was a softball team.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to play softball. Well, the church softball team has one. So then you could kind of get involved.
Right, yeah.
And then you see how people behave around you and things they talk about, and then it starts to pique your interest, and then you start moving in different directions. So those social aspects of it can be really inviting, and they're easier to find now.
Yeah, so one of the ways you say it is the faith is more caught than taught. And so we catch it from each other. If I'm hanging out with other Christ followers, but I'm not a Christ follower, I'm hanging out with them and I'm interested in the way they're doing life. And the next thing you know, I'm asking questions, and pretty soon, it's just like anything in our lives where if you're into golf, okay, you're a golfer, right?
Yep.
So you're going to be interested in learning a little bit about golf, and you're going to hang around with golfers, and the next thing you know, you're a full-fledged golfer, and you're spending your money on golf.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely, it's a major addiction, and the same thing, comes with the church. We've gotten away from the church, the corner preaching, and it kind of loud and in your face,
right? Confrontational. What's that called? Fire and brimstone.
Yeah, brimstone and fire is kind of what I think of. But you're seeing, hey, this person has less anxiety. Things aren't going well for them, but yet somehow they seem to be okay or in a good position. Yeah. I noticed my life without Christ had a lot more anxiety in it, trying to do this alone. But when you had something to lean into, well, you can see when people are like that, and it is addictive. You're like, well, I want what they've got.
Yeah. I said I don't know when that changed. I think I do know when it changed.
Okay.
I think what's happened is we used to have more of in our culture, we used to have more of a Christian memory. People would understand the basics just because culturally it was just part of our lives as Americans. Everybody was kind of surrounded by the church, in some way or another. They could probably quote some of the 10 Commandments. They could probably name a few of the disciples, or just some basic stuff that the church taught that really our culture knew. And so you could start right at the fire and brimstone place, and people were way more ready to step across that line because they weren't as far away from the line. Now today, culturally, we're further removed from that line, and so I think maybe that's part of that. So
it sounds logical to me.
Yeah. What's the next one?
The elder board won't add your multicolored end times chart to the church bylaws.
Yeah, keep going with it. What else did I say?
Another reason we should go with congregational rule instead of elder rule. The customer is always right.
Why am I laughing?
But it's funny and it's humorous, and that's the way we view as consumers. I'd like to believe when there's education involved, though, we should assume that the teacher and the more experienced people are right.
Yeah.
This is a little different than buying a tennis shoe.
And there's a right way to buy a tennis shoe, too. Yeah. So, I know it's tongue in cheek, but at the same time, the reason it's funny is because it's a little bit painful because people come in and all people have an agenda. I mean, I have an agenda, you have an agenda, and we want the church to adopt our agenda, whether it's end times or whether it's my political views, which has been awful.
Yeah.
It's been, we've come through just a toxic, and I say come through, we're not through it, but we're in a toxic political environment where we're so polarized that there's no room in the middle for anything. And so we've had people at Blue Mountain, we have refused to be a political church. I mean, we've just refused to play blue or red. We said that is not who we are. It's not where we're trying to go. It actually alienates 50% of our community if we dial down on the blue or dial down on the red. And so we've said, no, we're not going to do that. Well, we've had people leave that are blue because we weren't blue enough, and we've had people leave that are red because we're not red enough. And so what do you do? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I don't know. That is a tough question. I think that's one of the big questions going on right now is how to navigate that. And we have, I think that goes, and that's part of the humor or the joking or the poking that goes into this whole article is we're quick to leave, and we're also, it's about me. Yeah. How is this church serving me instead of us trying to serve God and Jesus' mission and serve the church, which serves the community? And as long as we have that consumer mentality and all we're trying to do is suck what we can get out of it so it makes us feel good, we'll probably be battling that for a long time moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. It becomes about what I'm looking. Okay, so when the church was started 2,000 years ago, a few years ago, actually our church was started 125 years ago, right? Yeah. We're going to have a celebration coming up
on the 16th.
I digress, right?
Yeah, good little promo.
Yeah, a little promo. When the church was started, the idea wasn't to meet your needs, really. It was to understand who God was, and it was to have a relationship with God, and then to walk together with other people and to be on mission. But somewhere along the line, it became about, well, what does my family need right now? And what music do I like best? And what, it just became about programs and what program meets my needs, and that's where I connect. Radically different.
It is a consumer-based. It's changed.
Yeah, and so the other frustrating thing with being consumer-based is everybody's temporary.
Yep.
Because as a consumer, I'm going to be satisfied with your product until I'm not, and until somebody comes out with a different product. I mean, I'm that way with all kinds of things in my life. I like this, cleaner until I don't, or I like that motor oil until another motor oil comes out, whatever.
Yeah.
And then we're off to the next thing. And it really, I think it, I don't think it reflects what the church was intended to be from the beginning.
No, I agree.
Yeah. What's the next one?
Someone confronted you about your incessant complaining about the service and slandering of the leaders. Not very loving or affirming. I even heard they asked one of the leaders to step down after he disqualified himself. Again, not very inclusive behavior. Red flag. Leave immediately.
Yeah. Painful. Someone confronted you about your incessant complaining about the services and slandering the leaders. For some reason, I say we. I don't include me in we in this one. People tend to think that it's okay to just slander the leaders or slander, or just say bad things about the church or about the everything. I mean, whether and they actually sometimes do it in little corners of the church. Hey, let's sit over here. We're not going to go in there. We're going to sit here and talk about how bad that is. I've had it happen here in this building many times, and those people are here, and then they go somewhere else. And the thing is, they're not going to be happy there either. They'll be happy there for a while, and then,
that one I do believe is extremely cultural, and how it's keyboard warriors, and you get a little bit of that carryover that you say whatever you want, and there's no kickback or issue with it, and then you grumble and leave. I don't know why people always have to feel like make the huge announcement that they're leaving. Also, like if you're done, move on, but why make a scene out of it?
So I'll let you in a little bit about how I think. I hate when people leave the church for any reason. I hate it because it always feels completely, totally, and absolutely personal. It shouldn't, but it does. I feel because in the end, as a pastor, I'm the one who hired the children's ministry person, and I'm responsible for that. I'm the one who hired the worship person, and I'm responsible, for that. And I'm the one who, and so rejection of the church in some way is, and I know it's a Jim issue, and you probably should see a counselor for this, but it just feels really personal. The other day I had a conversation with a longtime member who I hadn't seen in church in a while, and so I called him up, and he said, I've switched allegiances. What is that? I've switched allegiances. I'm somewhere else. Well, wow. And, so he didn't call and say anything to me or make a noise. He just disappeared. I think people are much more likely to disappear than to have the respect to actually say something to you.
Yeah.
So, but it to me it's always feels personal, whether it is personal or not. It probably isn't as personal as I take it, but it took a little break there, didn't you, Justin?
Yeah, I can't. I'm not used to this. I'm exhausted. I had to take a little nap, so we're back. You weren't invited to lead worship on your first day. Do they even care about people using their spiritual gifts? The double-necked flying V guitar would sure beat their lame worship leader's pathetic acoustic set.
So that one's a little bit funny.
Yeah.
But I've actually heard stories where, somebody has visited a church, especially smaller churches. Smaller churches are always desperate for a worship leader or a youth leader or a children's ministry leader or anything. And a lot of churches have no families, or they have one family. And if we could only have somebody to teach Sunday school, then we could have two families, that kind of thing. So I've seen it on the other side. I've never really seen it, somebody really offended that they weren't asked to lead worship. But I've seen, I had a friend who visited a church, and they said, "Oh, will you preach next week?" And it's like, whoa. He's like, "I'm visiting, first time visiting, and you're asking me to preach next Sunday, and you don't even know me yet." And so I've seen it on the other side. What about you?
I was going to say as far as the music thing goes, I find it, if you want to look at the one place in church where, so you've got politics, and so you have, one side or the other, and it's two. But when you look at music, you have country, you have rock, you have worship, you have hymns, you have gospel.
Gossip.
You have gossip, you have gospel.
Right.
R&B. I mean, there's so many different, the music that people listen to in their daily lives are so spread out.
Okay, yeah.
That if you have a worship leader that has a country twang, and you're not into country, like, that person may not like the music. Now, I think you're missing the point at that point in time.
Okay, let's unpack that just a little bit. So, at any given moment on a Sunday, we have 5 generations in the sanctuary. 5 generations, from grandma and grandpa or great grandma and grandpa down to little tiny kiddo. Do you like the same kind of music your parents like?
No,
No.
There's a little bit of crossover, some things I can appreciate.
Yeah.
I don't even like the same music that my wife likes.
Oh,
so, I mean,
wow.
like, even inside our house,
Yeah.
if I have control of the radio,
Yeah.
it's this. If she has control, it's
Wow.
something different.
What do you like?
I like pretty much everything. I liked the heavy metal. I like a big guitar, and if I'm in that mood, and then I also like country. Wife likes classic rock.
Okay.
So she'll put a lot of those on.
Yeah.
And, so you have the balance back and forth.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And if you, okay, so you have to balance back and forth, but if you try to balance back and forth at church, nobody's happy.
Yep.
And that's a funny thing, because nobody really is happy with that, because of, well, the music's too loud, or they never sing hymns, or, it's 7-11, 7 words 11 times, or whatever.
Yeah, the worship stuff. I think you have to pick your lane. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah, this is our style.
This is the music that fits the style that we're going for,
Okay.
our vision, our mission, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
And you hope that people will see the mission and vision, and be okay with the music regardless. It is. We're there to worship Jesus. We're there to celebrate his love and do that kind of stuff. And whether it's in a rap form, a country form, spoken word, I think, different things.
That's my least favorite.
You just go with it. I don't know. I think my mom loves the music time in worship.
Yeah.
That is how she gets more out of that than she may get out of the teaching.
Yeah, sure.
I'm the opposite. I'm fine if there's no songs, a half a song, and I could listen to someone teach for 45, 50 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think you have that in that congregation too that's
Right.
it's split. It's just
Because we're all different. Yeah.
But you have to, I think if you have a consistent formula, people know what they get. And probably at that point in time, I guess in this, with people leaving, somebody will say, hey, this is not for me the first time they visit, and then go find something. If you're consistent, though, I don't think somebody 2 years down the road after coming here is all of a sudden going to go, yeah, I need to leave.
Yeah.
Because at least you've been consistent with
you
how
knew what the music was, right?
I do wish we would have people that would just want to play in the band on a regular basis.
Yeah, a drummer. It should be nice if we had another drummer.
Yeah, if you know anyone that's a drummer.
Yeah, please drum us. Let's talk for a second about online church. Right now, our practice up until this point has been to stream our service and record it and put it online. But we have found that people are typically, not all people, but most people we can watch when they log on to our online service. And a lot of the times they move past the worship set and go right to the sermon. What do you think that's all about?
I don't know if it's I can only speak for myself, I guess, because I haven't interviewed a bunch of people to ask. But that definitely is people that are a lot smarter than I am that have written books. And then just looking at our own analytics, a lot of times it is 15 minutes in is where you're going to see the spike.
Yeah.
And then when the teaching's down, that's where you start to see people leaving the service. And I think that's, I don't know if I'm going to sit in my house and start singing by myself.
Yeah.
Worship seems like a group activity.
Sure.
There's nothing better when you hear the whole congregation singing along to the worship band.
Yeah.
And I think when you're in your house, that's the easiest time to be distracted.
Well, yeah, and it's easy to find better music in your house.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can listen to anything in your house, and sometimes what we're trying to project, it sounds great in the room, but it might not sound so great coming out of your laptop or out of your telephone, or that kind of thing.
That is technology is the toughest part. The movies and music videos and stuff that we watch at home, these artists are doing the same song 100 times, being recorded, absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
I love our worship band, but they're not Class A music artists or whatever you want to call it in a sense, and they have some imperfections. And when those it's hard to record those at home, so it can be distracting. And we go back to if I'm a Chris Tomlin guy or I'm a
right.
Zach Williams guy.
Yeah.
You know, those are two different sounds.
Yeah, sure.
I can pull on Spotify and have my own worship song
Yeah, you
of
could.
great quality. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things you're fighting against.
Next one, they've asked you to stop blowing your trumpet before you drop your crumpled bills into the offering plate. We want to receive our reward now.
Luckily, I don't pay attention to me. I usually shoot fireworks off. I don't have a trumpet, but it's kind of funny. Here we don't pass the plate, so
Right.
that's
Right.
it doesn't.
Neither do we at Skyrocket.
Yeah, so this doesn't relate as much, but it is kind of funny. It reminds me of a Seinfeld episode where, you know, they go to put the tip in the jar, but the worker didn't see them, so then they grab the money out,
And they put it back.
and then it looks like they're taking tips to try and put it in. But like that, why do we the concept of being seen when we have to give? It doesn't count unless somebody saw it. It's
Right.
kind of funny.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably less. The last one. What was the last one?
The movie clips are all from outdated movies.
So we used to use quite a bit of movie clips during a sermon way back in the day. And it's just because movies really are the way we tell our story and tell stories, this, you know, good and evil and love and all that kind of stuff. But we can't do it anymore because we put it online, right? And so when you broadcast it beyond your four walls, you don't have permission to show a movie clip online.
Yeah, you could end up in a pretty costly thing. I don't know how many times I feel bad about once a month I have to be like, no, we can't do that.
Can't do that. Yeah.
Can't do that.
Right. I'm like, hey, can we do this song? No,
No.
we don't have.
Can't do it.
It's
It's
copyrighted. Like, no, it would just match what I'm trying to say so well. No, can't do it. It's
It
like,
just doesn't work.
Come on,
I feel
man.
like a Debbie Downer, but it's just like the last thing you want to do, though, is get in trouble.
yeah. So it's kind of a humorous conversation. You know, here's biblical reasons for leaving a church. Are there any biblical reasons, do you think, for leaving a church?
Yeah. I think one is if you walk in and there's flawed theology.
Flawed theology. Okay.
I mean, I think that's one way you go. My parents are in a denomination that is going through a split.
Okay. And what's that split around?
On gay marriage and
Okay.
inclusion and that kind of stuff. And the church is kind of splitting as to how to handle that situation.
Sure.
And I think that's an appropriate time to split, regardless of which direction you're going. But the theology at that point in time is being tested.
Sure.
And if you don't agree with that theology and you don't think it falls in line with your own research and things that you've done, then I think that is a time to walk away. If you start seeing, I think a church, if you walk in and it seems to be them-centered, is another reason. If it seems
Like
to
if
be, hey, we're filling ourselves up, it's all about the pastor.
Oh,
They're the ones, they have a connection
yeah.
to Jesus, whatever it may be. So any kind of those things I think are red flags, and I would leave at that point in time.
Abuse. I mean, if you're being abused or if other people are being abused, manipulation. I think.
Any of the moral failures.
Moral failure. Yeah, I mean, so that's one of those weird things. All churches will have a moral failure in them at some point, and you need somebody to stick around and right the ship after the moral failure.
Yeah.
But maybe you're saying if you see a moral failure in a leader, but nobody's addressing it.
I guess if it's run rampant at that point in time.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think if it's a standalone one individual, we all make mistakes and make poor decisions and things like that, and that person probably needs to be handled or addressed. But yeah, I guess I was referring more to if it's a rampant. You walk into a church and a whole bunch of people are treating one sex as another as a lower class, that kind of thing.
It's weird. oftentimes you don't you don't know that when you visit a church that something really weird is going on or something, and then you make connections with the church, and so it's really hard to just peel yourself away because you love the people and you've connected with them, but then there's this weirdness that is unacceptable. What do you do with that? So.
Yeah, it's tough, and I guess I would suggest trust your instincts in certain circumstances like that. Yeah. There's probably, if it's music, or I'm very disappointed in the Babylon Bee that they use coffee instead of donuts. Oh, because right. I feel like churches and donuts also go hand in hand. Yeah. So if they're not getting them from Krispy Kreme, then
okay. Why'd you go there?
Sorry, because I know somebody likes Krispy Kreme.
I love
donuts.
Krispy Kreme. It's like my kryptonite. I probably have a lot of kryptonites, but that's one of my great kryptonites is Krispy Kreme donuts. And we don't have Krispy Kreme donut here, so we got to drive a long way to get Krispy Kreme donuts.
Definitely, but I just trust your instinct would be my when you go in, and then ask people that you trust.
Yeah.
My guess is even if you're new to the faith, there's probably someone that you can lean into and say, hey, this is kind of going on. Does this seem okay? And I would ask the questions.
Sure. One thing that I really wish is that people, like in the old days, where the church was, you just stayed and you just put down roots, and this became your church home, and you you just loved the people and they loved you, and you pour your life into it, and so I think that's a thing that we don't see like we used to see, and I think we're poorer for it.
When I went through a lot of the 125-year history that we have here.
Right, because we're 125 years old this year.
Yep. And if you haven't heard, on October 16th. But anyways, the church started, so two men rolled into town, and they preached on the corner. And then it turns into home churches. And you see, as you're going through this history, and it's very much a community. These people are all leaning into each other. Yeah. They all are the church, as opposed to where I think we have kind of gotten now that the church is a singular individual, or it's not. We rely on the pastor or the staff or certain individuals to fill us up, instead of back in the research that I've noticed, they were all the church. Yes, there was a pastor and there was a leader, but they were all involved. They grew together, they ate together, they socialized together. They used the other 167 hours of the week instead of just that one on Sunday. So
there is a way to do that, and we have ways to do that too. I mean, if you get connected in our small groups, that's where a family is formed, a family of people who walk together and love each other and do life together, and those deep connections are formed, and so we do have it. It's just you have to seek it, and I just know that it's everything. Yeah, it's everything.
Definitely is.
Well, good stuff. Thanks for jumping in today, filling in for JD.
Hopefully you guys see me again. That means they didn't get rid of me after this experience. But
we've got quite a bit for Justin to do, and he's kind of helping us rethink really what does online church look like. I say rethink. How about come up with what online church looks like? And so he'll be around.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Monday Matters.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.